All righty. Hello, everybody. I am so happy to be here with you all today. I know it has been a very long time since we have been together, but all is well. I'm doing great. Welcome to the Moments with Mikaylia Podcast. This is our and final installment of the Mental Health Matters series. And we are titling it Purity Culture. And we are going to be demything and detoxing our thought processes from what we were taught as children or growing up in whatever era as purity culture. A couple things before we get started. Number one, make sure you are allowing StreamYard to see your comments. Feel free to come in, say, hey, who you are, where you're from, so I can see who's on. Also, if you look in the bottom of your screen right here, those are our social media platforms. If you would be so gracious to follow us, like, subscribe, share with your friends, all of those things. And we have some very exciting things coming up, and we definitely want you to be a part of it. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, this is our last installment of our Mental Health Matters series. And today we have with us Mandi, Wansley, and Dr. Joseph. That we are all in Nashville, Tennessee, and we are going to, share our experiences of purity culture and how it affected our thinking. Also, my disclaimer, y'all already know, if we say anything that triggers you, if we say anything that brings back any memories, please go seek a therapist. I highly recommend it. Go talk to somebody, go seek a therapist, so that you can just be made new. Hey, Kia, thank you for joining. So I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Joseph and Mandi. Either of you guys can go first and introduce yourselves before we get started.
Go ahead.
Well, good evening, good night, everyone. My name is Andrea Joseph. I'm a professor of social work, and I just got intrigued on this topic because Mandi Wansley posted something really interesting that spurred a really great conversation on purity culture. So I said, you know what, I don't mind talking about this topic, but because just in relation to conversations I've had with other women in the church, my own experiences, I think, I have a bit or two to share about it.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mandi Wansley, and I'm currently a school social worker for Metro Nashville Public Schools. Just involved in church and just been in church my whole life. So, yeah, this topic hit kind of home when it struck a good nerve when I saw it. So yes, I'm glad to get into this conversation because it's much needed and long overdue.
Long overdue. So I guess I'll start everything off. So purity culture. So I grew up in the 90s, 1993, and I was, so around, I want to say 1999, 2000 for me. I was still in kindergarten. I was in church, I guess getting acclimated. I was on everything, on the little junior usher board, anything you can think of, I was there. And I think when I was about 6 or 7, my mom had started talking to me about, things that women need to talk about. Because if nobody else gonna tell you, your parents need to tell you. And so I guess I want to say that I wasn't a victim per se of purity culture because my mom and my dad, they did take the time to talk to me about some things as a child. But I know people who are products of their environment and products of what they came up in. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but, we went with what we were taught, before we could think and reason for ourselves. Most people don't know, but when I was married, I was a virgin. I was a virgin for 23 years before I was married. And while I was growing up, in my teenage years and going to 18 and 19, I had this awakening where I felt like, okay, now I'm at the point where I'm saving myself for marriage for me, and not necessarily because I was taught. Um, and that was one of the things that I guess I wanted to discuss. Just healthier decision making when it comes to things we're doing with our bodies. Because, as a child, yeah, you're going to do what your parents tell you to do. 98% of the time, we think it's right. But a lot of times, we grew up and we didn't get an explanation for stuff. It was just like, you're going to be a virgin. Like I said, this ain't discrediting my mother, but I've literally heard of these stories and people were like, my parent told me that I'm going to be a virgin. I need to be a virgin. I need to save myself for marriage because it's the right thing to do. And there's no explanation as to why, So therefore, when you know why you're doing something, you're able to make better decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think the first thing that pops up for me is how, in the context in which parents and guardians are having conversations with their children, their young ones, about sex in general.
Yes.
Right? Like, is it a hush-hush conversation? Is it one laced with shame? Is it one that's like, oh, that's nasty, you don't want to do that? How is the conversation discussed? And I think so many of us can speak from our own or different perspectives. But I think a lot of times parents need to start there. And how are you having the conversation with your child? What tone is it going on, right? Is it, talk to from a biblical perspective about the relationship between a couple? Is it taught as something that's, you're bad if you do? Because I think that's the genesis. That's the beginning. What do your children understand and know about sex? And I think when I was young, it was always something very bad. Can I tell y'all, I've told people this before, but never publicly. I kind of had an idea when I was young about what sex was. I didn't really know what it was, honestly, but I had an idea about what happened. Mm-hmm. Remember that song, Let's Talk About Sex, Baby, came on radio. And I said to my dad, because I knew it would make him queasy, I said, Daddy, what's sex? I'll talk to you about that when you're an adult, when you're older, right? And then it came on again, and I did it because I knew it would get a rise out of him. He's like, I said, I'll talk to you about that when you're adult, right? When you're older. And I just did it because I knew it would get a rise out of him, but because he was afraid to talk to me about it. When I talked to my mom about it, it was a very, this is not to condemn them. Our parents give us their best. And what they were given maybe. And, we didn't, we talked about sex, like in sort of anatomically, but when I said I wanted to start dating, the first conversation is take birth control. You can't date until you're 16 and you got to take birth control. And I remember the first feeling I felt was that you don't trust me. I started to feel, a lot of negative feelings. Right. And so I think the first part is to start with is how are parents having conversations about sex? And that helps us to understand a bit about where purity culture sort of derives from.
I'm going to not one up you, but I'm going to go a little further than that. Are parents having the conversation? Right. Even having it, and it's, of course, life doesn't come with an instruction manual for raising children, but are they even having the conversation at all? And there's no shade to my parents, but I think I can count on maybe one conversation, before I went to go to college where we had conversation about sex. And it's, I don't know if it was they knew me and my personality, or it's just if it was they were uncomfortable, or a little bit of both. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I really, I didn't date in high school or anything like that. So maybe they thought the conversation wasn't necessary. But just our parents having the conversation at all.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. So number one, I'm putting takeaways in the comments. So, people who are reading this, they can be like, okay, well, if I have kids that are of age, and I don't even think that there's necessarily a thing as of age. I think when you're younger, we do need to teach our children the anatomy parts and exactly what they are. Because, it's something, God forbid, if something were to happen, they can tell us exactly what happened and how it happened. So having the conversations, I think that number one, purity culture does not need to be used as a scare tactic. When I was studying this afternoon, and as we're getting into the topic of the fear of discussing sex and reproduction, I had a thought of my head, and I was like, why do we fear something that God created?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we fear something that God has created? And I think that because we feared having some of these conversations when women or men or whoever have these feelings, it takes a stab at how we see ourselves, because we don't necessarily value ourselves. There's like, okay, well, we're having this feeling, or we're dealing with this. Okay, well, this must be bad, so I must. And some people think literally all the way down the slope.
I think it's definitely the culture around sex. How does Western society treat sex, treat bodies, treat women's bodies, right? You can see that large disconnect between how men might treat their daughters, but treat other women. Right. And sometimes when men are trying to protect their daughters, they're inadvertently trying to protect their daughters from men like them. Let's just be honest, right? Sometimes that happens, right? Because there's a disconnect. You see your children as pure, and you want to see them untainted, right? These are like the verbiage that we might use, but then other women differently, right? Degrade other women, use other women's bodies, and I think there's a lot to be said about how we think about bodies in general, in this society, anyway.
Right. And shoot, I'm a big history buff, and it was just not too long ago that people of our color and people in general were only considered as 3/5 of a person. So I feel like that there's some, I guess, ancestral trauma in a sense. If I'm talking right, ancestral trauma when it comes to how we treat our bodies, because of the simple fact that boom, we had slavery. You take people from their homeland, bring them somewhere else. There was a bunch of rape and murders and just different things like that. So I really think that that we just have to have that conversation about, okay, and when we were in school, I remember they told us about the Pilgrims and the Indians and all that beautiful stuff, how we used to make the little Thanksgiving hats and all that stuff when we were in kindergarten. But it's like now I'm just like, wait a minute. So y'all actually, this is what y'all were doing. I think for me, when it comes to purity culture, it was like, okay, well, you don't do it because it's the right thing to do or the Bible said so. But then here it is, going on 27 on Thursday. And it's just like, okay, there's a lot more to the conversation than what we make it seem. I do want to mention one thing. I actually came prepared, y'all. I brought notes. I was really one of the things that I had emailed Dr. Joseph this afternoon was kind of an example about how it was living in purity culture and I guess coming out of that era. And one of the things that I realized in purity culture is that everybody wasn't held accountable. Everybody was not held accountable. We're going to call it like it is. I think that in purity culture, there was such a systemic oppression on women. There's systemic oppression on women, not to be out there and not to necessarily cover themselves, but not to value themselves as they are, as a scare tactic, to the point that we forgot about holding men accountable too. Prime example, okay, women, you have to be virgins. And this is, church, worldly, however you want to put it. It's the same. It's kind of the same all the way around. Women have to not even hide themselves, but we have to do extra, to cover ourselves up. But we let men do what they want to do, and it's okay for them to do what
grace their wild oats, and we are not given that grace.
Yes, accountability. That's it. Everybody's not accountable.
Yeah, I think for me, I got to see, I think I have a unique sort of church or Christianity background in that by the time I was 18, I'd experienced like 3 different faith traditions. I grew up Catholic. My grandmother was Seventh-day Adventist. And by 18, 19, I started going to a Pentecostal apostolic church, right? So these are a mixture of sort of the faith traditions that I experienced. And I remember when I started going to the Pentecostal churches, when I started learning, like, how women should dress. And I think there was value in some of what I was taught.
Absolutely.
A lot of activity, right? And some of that with shame with the body. And I never had that before. I also learned to value my body in certain ways, but I also learned the shame associated with my body, and that, your body can be a stumbling block to men. But I've never heard in my time in church the ways that men's bodies are a stumbling block to women, right?
Because they can be.
Oh, yes.
Right. So make sure you cover your cleavage, and make sure your skirt is down to your ankles.
Don't show your arm.
Don't you dare show above those elbows. So many things. And I feel that what I learned in that was to judge other people, right? I began to carry judgment with me, and to me that's a weight. But what I learned over time is, as much as I try to cover my shoulders, cover my cleavage, make sure the skirt's not too tight or it's long enough, it won't stop a man from desiring me. It won't stop a man from making lewd comments about me, because trust and believe, I walked out my house very modestly, according to church standards, that is, and still received lewd comments from men, because now they have some additional curiosities, right? And so what that says to me is accountability. We got to do that that's individual work, right? Your church can create standards, but then you need to have standards that's going to keep you aligned with God. And I think as I was preparing for this, I think the biggest takeaway for me is sometimes we focus so much on purity culture that we idolize that instead of elevating what it means to, when we step out of the bounds that God has for us, that we begin to lose connection, relationship. And to me, that's the biggest thing I'm scared of. I do not want to lose my relationship with the Lord.
Absolutely.
That's the most important piece. And so I think in all the teaching that we've been given around purity culture, I never experienced people wearing purity rings, although I've heard a lot about that. People having purity balls, like dances with their fathers, and I never knew about that. I never experienced that, but I've done some reading and found that was a thing. But again, as we think about maybe y'all could tell me, were boys wearing purity rings?
So I will say, I remember, so my mom gave me I had a purity ring when I was younger. And the way she explained it was that it was, a reminder of the promise that I had to God. Of course, I got older, I couldn't wear it anymore. It's somewhere in the house. But I wore it as a symbol of, okay, God, now that I'm coming into my own, I'm in my teen years, I'm going through some changes. I want to do this because I want to do it. And I have seen women who, and like I said, I'm not shaming anybody for their choices.
Yep.
But I went back and did some family history, and I went back and I talked to some people, and I have seen trying to think of the right word. I have seen the generational trend of women and how they treat their bodies and the side effects that happen, or the things that they have to experience because they gave themselves away to so many people. So as seeing that, I made the choice, I'm not only going to do it because my parents told me it's the right thing to do. I'm trying to save myself. Again, like I said, I'm still trying to save myself because I don't want to go through what I've seen other people go through. I don't want to go through the mental trauma that people have gone through because they've given pieces of themselves to any and everybody that has legs. And they wonder why they have all this emotional trauma and messed up in the brain and they can't function. When you give pieces of, I feel like when you give pieces of yourself away, when God does send the man that he has for you, the husband that he has for you, and men, I'm talking to you too, the wife that he has for you, when you get to that point, it's just like, okay, I don't have anything else to give because I gave it away. And even in this transition for me, I'm learning that although I'm not married anymore, I still believe that it is absolutely essential to remain pure, however you want to call it, and to keep myself. I have to keep myself, and in order for God to restore things, we have to do the work. And so, what does it look like? Saying, God, I want you to restore X, Y, Z. I want you to do this for me. I need you to restore this in my life. When I get married again, I want you to do this. And then I'm out here, swinging Sally and jiggling Jane and all that. God, I mean, am I making sense? I just want to make sure I'm making sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about emotional baggage as it relates to purity culture, I think of many women I've heard from, and you could, do a Google search and find this, that spent so many years idolizing purity that they have a hard time developing intimacy with their husband.
Yes.
Because they're in their head about, being unholy and being bad, right? We know that's not an issue for all women, but that is a thing as well. And I think, again, that's why it's really important to, when discussing, if a church decides to engage with, this notion of purity culture, and they may not call it that, but what is coming along, what stigma might be coming along with that? Like, what are the ways that she and he and others are judging themselves and judging others? Because like I said, there was a time that I found that myself being very judgmental of others. In my aim and my strive to be holy, I became judgmental. Aligned. The two don't have to be aligned, right? And condemning others and deciding that you are worthy or unworthy because you are or are not a virgin. Can I take a moment to tell y'all this? Did you watch the reality show called Married at First Sight? There was a season.
No, I couldn't take it. It was
but there was a couple called Iris and Keith, and their example was really interesting because Iris was a virgin before they got married, and
you can marry at first sight.
I'm married at first sight, right? She's a virgin, and I get it that she struggled with intimacy with this guy because they didn't know each other. I totally get that. Her, in some ways, because she was a virgin, she judged him for not, right? And she had a hard time even developing a mature relationship with this guy who was now her legal husband, because in my opinion, I never spoke with Iris. She idolized her virginity so much so that she became judgmental. And so I think, again, what labels are being tied to your virginity? What labels are being tied to your aim for purity, so to speak? And I think that's problematic if it's one that causes you to judge others, but also when it causes you to judge yourself, that when you are married, that you have a hard time making connection with your partner because, you've been so focused on this notion of purity and forgetting that it really means intimacy with God and oneness, connection with Jesus.
Yeah, I'll say I was guilty of that judgment I'm not in that headspace anymore, but for a long time it was like, yes, I'm saving myself for marriage so I can get up and boast and brag about, yes, I saved myself from marriage. The Lord is so good. And look, if I can do it, you can do it too. And then, the Lord had to check me. Yeah, that's not, it became, like you said, we idolized it so much that it wasn't even about being right with Jesus. It was about having bragging rights. And check me. It was like, nah, that's not why. That's not why at all.
Yeah.
Not bashing the purity culture or anything like that, but we have to make sure that it's not coming from that you're not just doing it for bragging rights, but it's really a sincere desire to be right and do what God says, but not from
Yeah.
a judgmental standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. And I can't say enough about judgment of self, because I've seen too many people who are afraid to come back to church
Mm-hmm.
because they feel like, well, I did this and I did that. You know, folks are gonna judge me, but they're judging themselves. God's not gonna love me because of what I've done. Man, if you don't come back to church and just develop your relationship with Christ, that's what it's about. Not about labels. It's about getting ready, developing a relationship with Christ. And I think about the woman caught in adultery, right? And and Jesus said, whoever hasn't sinned, be the first to cast a stone, and nobody could cast their stone, right?
Right.
And Jesus say to her, he said, has no one condemned you? She says, no one has condemned you. He said, neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave this life of sin. That's it. Turn away, right? But it's not. That's why I say that self-judgment is big, but we have to consider the way that it makes us judgmental in general.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought that point up, because I didn't, like I said, I guess I was fortunate to come into a place where it was talked. Like, my mom was the over the teen ministry at my church in North Carolina, and so, like, I guess I was fortunate to come into the knowledge of the truth. I'm like, hey, I'm going to tell you why it's the right thing to do, and here's the scripture to back you up. But also, when I became of age, my mother and my father gave me the free will to make my own decisions. And I think that we lack and I think, Dr. Joseph, you had mentioned this in our email. We lack the social emotional skills to reason these things out, because nobody is giving us an explanation. And, it's not like, clean your room because I told you so. No, you're going to clean your room because I told you to do it. I feel like I don't have any children, but I have been involved in a lot of children's lives. And I think, granted, there are some things that, if I tell you to do it, this is what it is. But also, I think that as we're in a new society and, our children are seeing things that they've never seen before. And I mean that in whatever way you want to take it. I think that we have to teach them, okay, this is why I do what you do. I'm going to teach you what I know. I'm going to give you the best I know how, but I'm going to get the same way God gives us free will. I'm going to give you the free will to make your own decisions. And hopefully with the information you have, you make the decision that's best for you. And I think a lot of times, and again, not shaming anybody's judgmental choice, not being judgmental of anybody's choices. But back to what Dr. Joseph said, we do become a little bit judgmental when people don't think like us, even within the faith. I remember, I was the goals, I guess you want to say. I was labeled as goals. It bothered me to my core, just because I was a virgin when I had gotten married the first time. And even when I was, growing up in college and different things like that, like, I honestly felt myself, like, I can see, I guess, kind of going through my brain, I can see where I was a little bit judgmental of people who were doing what they do, because I was just like, oh, well, I'm a virgin, I'm staying this way till I get married. And then, I had people that I was connected to in classes and different things that were doing what they were doing. And I just kind of side-eyed them. I was like, oh, well, you don't do what I do. You don't live how I live, or you're not a virgin, so you can't hang with me. But thankfully, I had people around me that I guess were more experienced, and they not necessarily taught me stuff that I didn't know, but they just came from a different angle, and they were like, you can't do that. You can't judge people for not living the way you live, or not thinking the way you think, or not saying that it's right or wrong, but you can't, you can't scrutinize them. That's the word. You can't scrutinize them for not making mistakes. And a lot of times those decisions were made because that's what they knew, and parents teach what they know. And so if a parent or a guardian or whoever is taking care of a child, male, female, in this age concerning this, if they're not very well educated, we kind of can't blame the younger generation
Mhm. I believe it's all about leading people to relationship with the Lord.
Yes.
Mhm.
Because as you develop a relationship with God and you realize that there's more to this life than what you see, that there's a spiritual side to this life, and that as you follow what God has called, how God has called us to live, you learn that closeness, the beauty of relationship with Christ. And then when you begin not to live according to his word and you feel that disconnection, that's why I feel like people need to learn for themselves what a relationship with Christ means, because you'll never feel that kind of deep love anywhere else, right? And you lose it. And so that's why it's beyond do what your parents say.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's beyond, do what the church says so that you don't look bad. It's about relationship with Christ. How do I maintain this relationship with Christ? You don't want to lose God's, your spiritual connection with the Lord. I think that's more complicated to teach, right? Because that requires, your parents and those around you living examples that show the beauty of relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
Desiring that, and then you forming your own relationship and not depending on that of your parents.
Yeah.
Therefore valuing that relationship so much so that you want to protect it.
Right. Dr. Joseph, I think, Mandi, you got this question too. You mentioned something earlier in our conversations, and you said analyzing what purity culture is and what it isn't allows us to analyze and talk about making a choice about gender roles versus accepting what you are told about gender. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Me?
Yes.
Lord, I don't even remember saying it. Oh Lord, I don't remember. But sometimes I go off. But
making a choice about gender roles versus accepting what you are told about gender.
Yeah, I mean, there are expectations that society puts on men and women. Period. We know that. There are expectations that the church puts on men and women. But then sometimes you are gifted to do certain things, and you got, and if you're trying to follow what the expectations of society or the church are about your womanhood or your maleness, but you may be missing out on some of your gifts and talents and your strengths, right? And so we always expect the woman to be the nurturer, but maybe the man's going to be more of the nurturer. Maybe the woman is going to be more hardline, right? Sometimes you expect the woman to be the one that's chefing it up. But I mean, if you want to eat good, you may not want to depend on me, right? Like maybe your husband is going to be the one that can really chef it up, right? And so it's not to say that you shouldn't learn to nourish yourself, and right, but like I think sometimes when we fall into gender roles, like I think about maybe, and I'm not married, right? So this is, sometimes when people first get married, they're like, I can't wait to cook this for my husband and do this and that. And then like 5 years down the line, he gets upset because you're not cooking and cleaning and setting his bathwater like you did in the beginning, right? Like, was that really you? Or was that what you were told that you're supposed to do, right? And so sometimes people say like, keep that same energy that you had in year one. Keep that energy, right? So like that's what I think about some of the gender roles too. Like we think that we need to be doing certain things, but maybe if as you learn your spouse and you learn yourself, you'll tell them straight up, here's what I have to offer. Like I'm engaged. And so I'm still learning as I grow, right? But I tell them all the time what to expect. Like I do my best with cleaning, I do my best with cooking, I do my best with these other things, but I tell him what my strengths are and what they aren't, and just being honest about that.
I'm gonna have honest conversations about what your strengths and weaknesses are. That's really good. And I know you were talking about the shame factor. I just want to throw this out there. I believe that as a result of the shame that you were talking about that can come with purity culture, that it has made us shameful about being open and honest with the areas, not necessarily open honest with the areas we're struggling, but our strengths and our weaknesses. I can do this, but I'm not good at this. And because I'm not good at this, okay, well, somebody's going to judge me or someone's gonna say this or that. So I think that's where the shame piece can come in when you're, even in friendships, have different connections with people. That shame can be there because you're so focused on, I think purity culture makes you put on your best self, but it don't make you put on your real self. That's a good one.
That's good.
Hold on, let me write that.
Good.
We got to pause. I got to write that.
Yes.
I'm writing this for real. Put on your best self, but not purity culture. I don't want to say when not used properly, but if it's used as one of those tactics of saying like it's gonna make you put on your best self as if you don't struggle. Like I'm gonna tell you, everybody got issues. Like we ain't the first people. We're not gonna everybody. It don't matter if you spend too much money, if you're an alcoholic, if whatever. Everybody got an issue, And I'm not saying that we have to put all of our business out there, but I think that we need to start having some hard conversations in the church, in our places of employment, whoever you're connected to, and be like, okay, well, you know what? I've been putting on this front or this persona because I want people to see my best self, but this is not my real self. And people can't get what they need from me in this connection or this friendship if I'm putting on a fake persona.
Yeah.
That's true.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, it does.
And then that's where it makes it challenging for when we're ready to start dating or trying to prepare for marriage because you've been so scared by the what not to do that you don't know what to do.
You don't know what to do.
And everybody, ain't nobody even get to know you because you've been told thou shalt not so much. And I'm just like,
well, what can I do? Right. Okay, what can I do? Like you're telling me what I can't do. Can you tell me what I can do?
Tell me what I
can. If I can't do this, how can I prepare for it?
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, dating. Like I was talking to one of my girlfriends about this, and she's around my age, late 30s, and she is talking to this guy. Or starting to talk to this guy, and she's so afraid she don't know what to say. Now, anybody could be shy and not know how to say, but she's like, no, I want him to make the first move because I don't want to seem too forward. I said, girl, if you don't tell that dude hello, if you don't say hello, because he might be scared too. Huh?
That's a real place though, because it's been fed into your head. Don't be fast. Don't make the first move. Don't throw yourself at dudes. Don't. How am anybody supposed to know?
Get to know anybody if you can't talk to them?
Not to do that.
Yeah, and you hear.
And the reality
I hear the stories. I used to hear this story. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. So the reality is, like you said, you telling me not to do this, not to do that. Some men, their strength is not communication sometimes. And if you don't say, hey, like you remember, not saying you got to be like when we were in middle school, like I like you, check yes, check no. Not saying that, but saying, hey, this is my name, XYZ, and just even start a conversation. They're not going to see that, and we can be potentially missing out on a great relationship or even a great friendship because we too afraid of they can't say. There's no what's the worst they can say. Because we're so afraid that if we say something first, then that's us chasing them and them not chasing us.
Yeah. And I wonder too, sometimes I feel like I've seen this with some women that I've engaged with in the church over the years. And sometimes we're like, no, I'm waiting for the sign that he's the one. I'm waiting for the sign that God has sent the one. And years pass years. And you're like, I'm still waiting. And you know what? That's a good thing. You wait, sis. But sometimes it starts with hello. Like, it's okay to engage in conversation, right? I think it's okay to talk to other women who have been dating, who are married, to talk about ways to date, how to date, how they start that, because it can feel unnerving. Trust me, I know. But sometimes I think because we're scared, we say, no, I'm just waiting for the Lord to tell me he's the one. The Lord may not come out like that and tell you he's the one. Everybody's process is different.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna throw a little monkey wrench in here for you.
Yes, please.
In the church, and I totally agree with everything you said. And sometimes in the church that can be problematic because of what has already been set in place. If the church sees you engaged in a conversation with someone of the opposite sex, they taking it and running with it, and they trying to put it down, and I don't even know the last name yet.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to throw another monkey wrench. Can I throw another one? So here's okay. I like I said, listen, I'm just gonna say it's my podcast. I'm gonna say what I want to. Because I think not in the church and what social media, whatever you want to call it, I think that we have been so accustomed to telling everybody everything that goes on with us. Mm-hmm. And so when people do have those conversations, they're just like, I didn't know you knew that person. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. Me and one of my very, very close friends, we had a conversation the other day, if not earlier, and we made the decision, because I don't have anything to prove to anybody, I don't have anything to post. And I think that when we get out of this notion that everybody has to know every single move we make, everybody got to know who we're friends with, not saying that yes, you're supposed to have wise counsel, but
yes,
everybody don't have to know what you got going on. That's career move, connections, network. Everybody don't have to know. And because we don't tell everybody everything, when stuff just happens out the sky, people are like, oh, well, I didn't know about it. It ain't your business.
It's all right.
It's your business.
You didn't have to know.
I told one of my friends, I have them hollering all the time. And I'm just like, y'all, real talk. I was like, when I go back into that phase of life again, I was like, I'm going to tell you straight up, I'm like, y'all will probably find out I'm married with children in my obituary. For real. And that's not to say that I want to be hidden or whatever, but I'm just like, I don't have nothing to prove. I don't have anything to post. So, I just don't. Like, I've been in that space. I just came out of that season to where I felt like that I had to put on for everybody, and I had to put on a show for people, and I had to do this and do that because it looked like it was good, and I had to put on this persona because these people knew who I was, they knew who I was connected to, and I literally suppressed who God made me to be because I was so trying to put on a front for everybody else because I wanted them to see me a certain way, because I wanted them to have a certain image of me. I'm not doing it. Like, y'all find out in my obituary. Like, for real. Like, I just came to the point, I have to do things for myself. And I spent most of my life, even coming into year 27, I literally told myself that 27 and beyond belongs to me. Like it belongs to me. If I don't want to, I don't have to speak about nothing I'm doing. If somebody, hears from Lord and said, okay, and I know the Lord for myself, so I can decipher whether you trying to be with the stuff or you actually have some wisdom to share. But I'm just in this season where it's just like, I don't have to tell everybody what's going on with me.
Yes.
Because everybody doesn't have your best interest. Some people just want to know what's going on just to be nosy. Right. And that's for all that. Friendships, what's your next move? You don't have to broadcast your next move.
Sure don't.
You don't. And we've been taught that so much, and now it's just like, okay, I'm literally detoxing myself from not sharing everything with everybody. Like, literally, since this transition I just came out of, like, I am the most private person now that you will ever know. Like, literally, Mandi and a smooth 5 other people know my address. Like, that's how private I am. Like, Mandi is probably one of the 6 people that can just pop up at my house and say that I'm outside. Because I've been there. I've been there where I've had to do everything, or I felt like that I've had to do that. And I was just like, you know what? Nah, like, yeah, y'all are good. Like, y'all didn't profit me anything. Y'all didn't do anything, not keeping things to myself or whatever, or not keeping things in a spotlight. Didn't. it not necessarily didn't do me any good. And, I was taught how, and yes, there were some things I needed to know about how to carry myself as a woman and things I needed to do. But aside from that, it didn't, letting everybody know everything didn't do any good because it just people can't talk about what they don't know. So if you don't know, then you can't talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel like that in purity culture, we do need to, I guess we're rare in 50 minutes now. So I guess we can kind of wrap up on this and get into what you guys are working on. I think when we realize that, I lost my train of thought. Mandi, where was I going?
You're talking about purity culture and
Lord have mercy. I just lost it. Okay, yes. Thank you, Jesus. Making the room for the open and honest conversation.
Yeah.
Going. I think that, after everything that has been said tonight, after everything has been discussed, we do need to ensure that, and like I said, it's not necessarily Christianity is not the only religion that does practice purity culture, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not only in Christianity, but in just our place of worship. And whatever you believe in, we need to make it a safe space for people to be able to talk about these things. Because, they may not know what to do when when you're a teenager and your body's out of whack, they may not know how to handle that portion of themselves, but their parents may have not taught them anything. But then, they go to their houses of worship, the place, where you think that you're supposed to get some sound wisdom and advice. And everybody's pushing them off because they don't want to have the conversation.
Because they're afraid, right? They're afraid. The stigma associated with, and there's just so much education, I do believe, that needs to happen with young people in general. Mm-hmm. And then even some older folks, right? Because I think what I have seen is that sometimes young people who have a lack of knowledge around sex and intimacy and sexuality will jump into doing everything because it's what they saw on TV, right? So not realizing that the media is showing a slice of what sexuality is, but not showing you a balance. Right. And so jumping in because there's a lack of conversation maybe within church or home about what sex and sexuality and intimacy is, they go off of what they see. And it's an extreme. It's an extreme, kind of like when I think about the drinking culture in colleges. Some students, as soon as they get to college, they just keep on drinking and drinking, right? Because they don't know their max. They don't know, they maybe not really engage with alcohol too much, and they now have liberty and freedom, not realizing that you're actually drinking way more than, people generally drink. It's just because it's been this thing that's you're told not to do. And as soon as you get some liberty, you just jump off the bridge.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so I think, so having that conversation so that your child can have some balance and understanding about what this is. I mean, I remember I was younger. I don't remember the name of the movie, but there was a really graphic sexual scene, and I went to see that movie with one of my friends, right? So then my mom needed to see that movie from a class that she was taking, and when that scene came on, and she took me to the movies with her to see it, and when that sexual scene came on, I pretended to be asleep. So I didn't want my mama knowing that I saw that, right? And then later she had a conversation with me. She's like, I want to let you know that that's not what sex is like. And I don't think I valued that conversation till later, but she was pained to see the way that sex looked like in that movie. And she wanted me to know that my body, was valuable, right? Yes. And that I wasn't a rag doll. Right. And that's what it was portrayed in that movie. Right. But sometimes when those conversations aren't had, then young people just jump into anything because that's what society told them and nobody else is giving them a balanced conversation.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's good. That's really good. We need to have balance. Not only balance, but education without balance or balance without education.
Yeah.
It's just open field.
Right.
Open
And
still.
again, the stigma associated with it. I know we're wrapping up, and so I can just close out by telling you a little bit about what I'm doing. It's funny, as we started this, I thought this, thinking like, I don't really do any research or work around this in my profession, but I'm actually starting to do some work with a colleague of mine about how parents talk to children about sexual abuse in Jamaica. I've yet to collect the data. I was supposed to go out there to collect the data, but then COVID-19 happened. But something that we learned in the research, one of my colleagues collected this data. She found that because of some of the stigma around sex, that parents are afraid to talk to their children about their body parts, and so afraid for their children to even see them kiss. Right, parents. This is not all Jamaicans. Right, but in her study, she found that some parents were afraid to kiss in front of their child lest they get the wrong idea. Right, now, this is where you can learn about healthy intimacy in the household, right? That was just her study. But what happens is, if a child now experiences sexual abuse, they may be afraid to talk to their parent about it because of shame, right? Because if shame has only been associated with those body parts, if shame is associated with kissing because you don't even see your parents do it, if somebody kisses you inappropriately, you may be afraid to tell your mama or your dad because I might get in trouble, because that's a nasty thing to do, right? Versus this thing happened and I don't like the way it made me feel, or I like the way that it made me feel, right? You want your kid to have the conversation so that you can help them process their thoughts, right? Because if you can't help them processing it, somebody, that's trying to take advantage of your child is going to help them process it in ways that are detrimental to their development.
Right. And I think I worked in, so I'm not a licensed social worker, but I was a case manager for about a year. And I can't tell you the amount of cases that I had when it came to, sexual abuse, and girls, like I'm talking from age 5 and 6, not valuing their bodies and having these things happen to them, teenage pregnancies. Like when I tell y'all won't, especially where we live at, like we have, even if we have to start the conversation, we have to have some type of conversations. And I know you were talking about, you didn't know how social work had bled into purity culture, but not even purity culture, but just safer decisions. I can tell you, even just the education standpoint of it, that will make a world of a difference. And, when I interviewed my kids, I remember I had a couple of children that were teenage parents. Like when I say whole teenage parents, and when I asked them, I was like, what was this and how did you do that? They're like, because that's what I saw and that's what I was taught. And so now, we were literally having to detox them from the negative, not even the negative mindset, but what they're dealing with while they have a child. And we're not talking about 5, 6, we're talking about, your child is the same age as your younger sibling. Like it's where I think we just need to, and a matter of fact, I think I'm going to start looking at, like I got my master's in criminal justice and public safety, but I don't think that we talk about education and public safety and what all those different factors are, because it's not just crime, it's not just domestic violence, it's not just drugs. There is a multifaceted level of public safety that I think that we need to discuss. So I'm definitely going to dig into that.
Yes.
I'm going to dig into that. So Mandi, what are you up to? I know you're a social worker. So so
before we dig into that, to piggyback on what you guys are saying, I had a thought a little over a year ago, and it really ties into this conversation that we're having. And the thought was, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it because I don't want to mess it up. So it was, how do we, the church, address and minister to those whose introduction to sexual activity was not voluntary? We preach abstinence, which is good, but how do we maintain that stand and minister to those who have been sexually abused without making them feel ashamed because they're not virgins? How do we tie that in? Because it's not that it was their choice to lose their virginity. And even if it was somebody's choice to lose their virginity, we still have to be mindful of that. But that's a whole nother another day.
Yeah.
You know, those are things that we have to be mindful when we're approaching the purity culture, and just, you know, it goes back to making sure that you're not being judgmental because you don't know how people got to where they
Right.
Their story.
everybody's sexual journey was not voluntary.
Right.
That's big.
Remember that.
Yeah.
And not only that, I do feel like that we have to, like, I'm so big, like when I say I'm so big on, there's a difference between extending grace and accepting any and everything. But what I think what I'm learning, because I feel like that I push people, like that's what I like. I push people, you know, I want everybody connected to me. Like you have no other choice but to be the best version of yourself. But also in that accountability piece, I also have learned how to extend grace because somebody extended it to me in the season. A lot, like Mandi can tell you, a lot of people extended some grace to me because I was so busy blaming and saying, well, this wasn't my fault. I didn't choose to go through this. And the reality is I kind of did. And Mandi, you know where I'm going with it. Like I kind of did choose to go through this, you know, and although the circumstances were not my fault. Melissa Fredericks, one of my favorite digital influencers, she always says the trauma or the incident may not be your fault, but the healing is always your responsibility. And I think once that I made the choice, I was just like, you know what? Nobody else is responsible for my healing but me. I'm responsible, and I'm responsible for what I've allowed to happen because I didn't value myself as I should have.
Yeah.
So I've been, you know, like I said, I've had those honest conversations with myself, and now I'm at the point of, okay, how do I take what I've learned, you know, in therapy? By the way, I did graduate therapy July 15th, I believe. So it's just like, you know, how do I take these? This is what I've learned in therapy, and so now I'm in the practice of walking those things out so that I can, you know, be beneficial to somebody, and not necessarily say, you know, well, you shouldn't do that. No, I've been where you are. I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, didn't like it, returned it. And I don't want you, I'm really big on, I don't want people to make the same mistakes that I made.
Yeah.
I'm so big on that. I'm so big on that. Yeah. So I think this was the start of a very good conversation. I'm sure we will all get together again. Right quick, I want to share my social media stuff right quick.
Okay.
And I'm going to let Mandi and Dr. Joseph share theirs, and then we will close out. So again, at the bottom of your screen, there we go. Yeah, at the bottom of your screen, here is the Instagram, Moments with Mikaylia INC. The Facebook is Moments with Mikaylia Podcast. I am on Periscope as well as Mikaylia Aleece. And I am also on YouTube as Mikaylia A. Dudley. Also, many of you may not know, but I am a notary in the state of Tennessee. And if you guys need anything notarized, I am mobile. So that means I come to you. If you are interested in patronizing my services, my website is below and you can definitely do that. Also, sponsorship and booking information. If you want to donate to what we are doing, this is a very good movement. We have a lot of things coming up. So if you want to donate, if you want to book me for any type of podcasting or digital influencing, or if you have a small business in Nashville or wherever you are, shoot me an email and we can talk about it. I can slide some ads in the podcast because I'm really big on branding and allowing people to. Like if I have a platform, I want everybody to eat at the table, you know? So make sure like, if you have a small business and you are just getting started, please email me, donate. Like I said, this is another one of my jobs. I don't get paid to do this. I didn't do it to get paid. Like I literally, I supply everything for this podcast. So if you want more content, please feel free to donate. Send me emails. If you guys have any questions, just hit me up, get at me, as the young people say. I'm gonna start being on here more regularly. Now I'm gonna try twice a month, so I'm gonna have to work some things around. But you'll definitely be seeing more from the podcast. And like I said, I will get anybody have any last thoughts before we go ahead and close out. Nothing.
I thought I was adding my information to the chat, but apparently,
yes. So you did. So yes, Mandi. So you did add your info. So I can see your information in the chat. So it's on there. So Mandi's Facebook is Mandi Wansley, and her Instagram is Miss Ray 8429. Miss Ray 8429. And Dr. Joseph, if you want to put your social media in the chat so people can follow you and what you're doing, that'll be great as well. Okay, so we have Andrea Joseph Facebook. Is it Andrea or Andrea?
Andrea.
Andrea Joseph on Facebook. Okay, she has a website, Andrea AshaJoseph.com. And we definitely want to go and patronize her business and what she is doing on her website.
I don't have a website for my business yet, or Facebook, but those are in the works. At least Facebook first, but you can.
Yes, let me tell y'all something. Mandi makes it, y'all. Like Mandylicious. I'm a patronize for Mandylicious Treats is the best trifles I've ever tasted. I have my order on the book every 3 weeks. Please patronize her, y'all. Like, please patronize her. I know she has some goals that she was wanting to reach in July concerning her trifles. I'm not too sure if she has reached it yet, but I know she has gotten somewhere close to it.
I have not reached it, but I'm making progress.
Good.
Mandi delivered my trifles today, and I am not ashamed to say I ate them both.
Every last one of them.
I'm not ashamed. It was good.
Yes, as soon as we get off of here, I'm finna go get my next one. So,
but for next month.
Yeah, thank you. But like I said, this is the Moments with Mikaylia podcast, and I thank you all for joining. If you guys have any questions, comments, feel free to email me at momentswithmikaylia@gmail.com. And this is closing out our Mental Health Matters series, and I will see you guys next episode. Peace out.